On today's Tech Help for Churches, 5 tips for making narrative podcasts. Hi, and welcome again to Tech Help for Churches. This is the show where every week I help you with new media, social media, just using the internet for your church. My name is Paul Allen Clifford. So you may have heard of the podcast Serial or maybe Startup, and if not, you've certainly heard of NPR and their style of storytelling. One of the cool new trends in podcasting is narrative podcasts, podcasts that tell a story through the eyes of a reporter, but they also tell the story with quotes, natural sound, environmental stuff, just what it takes to tell this story in the most interesting way. So how can you do a narrative podcast? Well, I've got 5 tips for you that will help. First off, you need to realize it's going to be a lot of work. When I record these podcasts, it's pretty simple. I cut off the beginning, cut off the end, put the opening tease at the front, then I've already got a project set up with the opening music, the closing music, so I'm pretty much done at that point. With a narrative podcast, it's going to be a lot more. So a 15-minute story, for example, is probably going to come from 2 or 3 hours of footage, at least. And getting it from the 2 or 3 hour point to the 15-minute tightly crafted story that's really interesting and engaging, that's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be kind of like sculpting in marble. You start with this huge block and then you just keep whacking away at it until you get rid of everything that is not essential to creating the art that you want to create. Well, narrative podcasts are going to be the same way. Next, when you go, because typically this isn't going to be shot in one place, it's going to be shot not only in the studio where you record the voiceover to tie it all together, but it will also be shot on location somewhere. So when you go, you should have a story in mind. What I mean by that is you shouldn't go and say, hey, let's see what happens. You want to direct the narrative a little bit so that, let's say that you were going to tell the story of your church's youth camp. You don't want to get an interview with the director of the youth camp that rambles on for an hour when only what you care about is how the camp changes when teenagers arrive. So guide that narrative. When you're interviewing other people, guide the questions so that you get the story that you need. Now, this isn't to say you should make up a story that isn't there. Don't do that. But don't just record a bazillion things and hope a story emerges, because it probably won't. So see what's happening there, use that as inspiration for the story you want to tell, and then get information that tells that story. Thirdly, record a lot of natural sound, or if it's video, B-roll. So what I mean is some nice environmental sounds. So if you're, again, at this summer camp, probably the sounds of nature are going to be nice. If they go on a canoe trip, sounds of the water and kids enjoying themselves, that kind of thing. You're going to want a lot of that, probably a lot more than you'll actually use, but it's better to have too much than be editing away and go, oh, if only I had. Well, it's better if you have that and you don't need it than if you need it and don't have it. Next, be open to other stories. Now, you might go planning to tell the story of what it's like when this summer camp has all these teenagers arrive, but it could be that in your discussion, in your interviewing, you come across an interesting story about how the worship center is named after someone who is well known in the denomination, and you might find that to be a better story than the one that you were gonna tell. If that's the case, then by all means tell the better story if it suits the aims of the podcast. And finally, don't make your snippets too long or too short. So it's tempting to just make an overarching story with maybe 2 or 3 interviews and be done. But what you want is you want the interviews to be as short as they can be and still convey the stuff that you need them to convey, but not so short that it becomes kind of annoying. Like, so I asked the director how things were when the teens arrived, and he said, more energetic, and that's it. So you don't want each of the quotes to be like a word or two. A sentence is better. So it would have been better if you also had a quote from the director that said, man, when they get here, everything comes alive. It's like the camp is more energetic. That's much better than just the words more energetic. But too long is him rambling on for 5 minutes, basically saying what he could have said in one sentence. So you've got to balance those two things. So those are some ideas about how you can record a narrative podcast, how you can create a story. This is something that I might be doing later on this summer. We've got a children's camp that our church puts on, and the kids have all kinds of fun. And I'm thinking that this is one of the possibilities, that I might tell the story of what it's like to be a camper at the camp, maybe interviewing some campers, maybe interviewing some of the volunteers that are going, things like that, to really get a flavor of the experience and really tell it like it is. Or I might not. But I need to go with these things in mind, keeping my eyes open for other more interesting stories and planning for the story I want to tell in case the more interesting stories don't arrive. Well, I hope that helped you. I hope that that is something else that can help your church in your podcasting journey. If you like this content, please subscribe to my email newsletter that's located at trinitydigitalmedia.com/newsletter. There you can get all kinds of free church tech gifts, including my book on podcasting, actually, I believe is in the rundown, and other church tech tips and tricks and ideas, ProPresenter training, and I let you know whenever I have a new training that's more organized and designed for you at your church to get a very tight feel on how to do something. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com. Go out and change eternity.